Have you ever had that feeling where you're talking to someone about the same event, but it's like you're speaking two completely different languages? It's a feeling a lot of us are having these days, and it's a symptom of a much bigger issue, societal polarization. In this explainer, we're going to break down how we got to this point and what it really means for all of us. So picture this, two people sitting in the very same living room. They're both looking at their phones, seeing headlines about the exact same event. But the stories they're reading are so wildly different, they might as well be coming from different planets. And the crazy thing is, this isn't science fiction. It's the world we're living in, where objective facts are taking a backseat to emotional appeals and personal beliefs.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with what polarization actually is. Then we'll dive into the information divide that's separating us. After that, we'll look at what's fueling this division, how it's playing out on a global scale, and finally, what the real cost of all this is. Let's jump in.
So let's start with this central idea, that these deep fractures in our societies are literally creating separate realities. It's a situation where that shared common ground we need to have a real debate is just eroding away, making it incredibly hard to solve problems together.
But before we get any deeper, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. To really get our heads around this problem, we need to be crystal clear on what we're actually talking about. So let's define a couple of key terms.
At its core, polarization is just this. It's the process of society cracking apart. Now, this is about way more than just disagreeing about stuff. It's about fragmenting into these opposing camps that see the world through completely different and often totally conflicting lenses.
And you know, this kind of polarization just thrives in what's been called a post-truth environment. In fact, Oxford Dictionaries named post-truth its word of the year way back in 2016. The key thing to understand here is that we're in a world where how we feel about something can be more powerful than the actual facts when it comes to shaping public opinion. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this actually look in our day-to-day lives? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle comes down to the information we all consume. Let's take a closer look at how we've ended up seeing the world so differently.
Wow, this really paints a picture of that divide, doesn't it? According to the Pew Research Center, liberals and conservatives are basically living in two completely different media ecosystems. You can see that liberals tend to trust a pretty wide range of news sources, but for conservatives, it's a very different story. Almost half of them point to one primary news source. This creates what are essentially parallel information universes, where the basic facts of a story can be completely different depending on which world you happen to live in.
So you gotta ask, right? What's really behind this massive divide? It's definitely not happening by accident. There are some really powerful systemic forces at work here, just pushing this fragmentation forward. Let's break down the engines that are driving us apart.
Research really points to three main drivers. First, you've got growing economic inequality. Second, the way social media algorithms are designed. And third, the rise of identity politics. You put all those together and you have a perfect storm for polarization.
According to the World Economic Forum, economic inequality isn't just another issue. It's seen as the most central risk we face. It's a trigger for so many other problems. When people feel like they're being left behind economically, it creates these deep fractures in society and can cause people to retreat into a more tribal mindset. And then, of course, you have social media. These platforms are engineered to do one thing really well: keep you engaged. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to feed you content that just confirms what you already believe. Their algorithms learn what you like and what makes you angry, and they just keep giving you more of it. This creates these echo chambers where you mostly hear from people you already agree with, which just reinforces your biases over and over, making compromise feel almost impossible.
Okay, let's zoom out for a minute and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just an issue happening within countries. The polarization we're all seeing is part of a much wider global trend of division and instability. Experts have a name for this: a geopolitical recession. It's basically a period where we're seeing more and more conflicts, while at the same time, the international cooperation we need to solve them is breaking down. In short, countries are becoming more focused on themselves and a lot less willing to work together on the big global problems. And look, this isn't just some abstract concept. A recent survey from the World Economic Forum ranked state-based armed conflict as the #1 global risk for 2025. To put that in perspective, just last year it was ranked number 8. That is a huge jump, and it really drives home the real-world danger of our fragmenting world.
The consequences of this are pretty stark. We're seeing a loss of faith in international bodies like the UN, the very places where countries are supposed to come together. Instead of working together, governments are increasingly acting alone, taking on these more adversarial, winner-takes-all attitudes. And what's the result? Defense budgets are skyrocketing, often at the expense of crucial spending back home on things like healthcare and education.
So where does all this lead? What's the end game here? What is the ultimate price we pay for all this division? Well, it's about a lot more than just political arguments. The long-term stakes for all of our societies are just incredibly high.
You know, the biggest cost here is the breakdown of trust. When we stop trusting our institutions, our news, and maybe most importantly, each other, the entire social fabric that holds us together becomes incredibly fragile. This raises the risk of everything from trade wars to actual wars, because it's pretty hard to negotiate a solution when you can't even agree on the basic facts of the situation.
And that really leaves us with one final critical question. The challenges we're facing, from climate change to economic stability, are very, very real. But if we can't even agree on what's real anymore, how on earth are we supposed to come together to solve any of them?